Now, there's been a lot of talk over the years about how Homelander is one of the greatest villains in modern TV, and I think it's hard to counter that argument, especially after the most recent episode. Antony Starr has really given us such a deep, ego-driven, complex character that we've come to realize has been traumatized by his past, and it shaped him into the very person that he is in the present day. However, what Season 4 Episode 4 gave us was time with Homelander in an environment and an atmosphere that we've not quite seen him in before. He visited home and went back to where it all started, something which gave us a glimpse into part of the character and the time before we knew him, and with that focus, each and every one of his small scenes had so much weight to it, and the performance was one of Starr's best. So I thought it was only right to delve into Homelander's feature in the episode and discuss why I feel it was perfect. So let's get into it. Here is how Homelander was perfected in The Boys Season 4 Episode 4. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. We learned of Homelander's past. This episode showed us a side to Homelander that we haven't really delved into that much before. We've heard the odd thing in the past about him being raised in a lab with the scientists putting him through extreme experiments in order to test his true powers to see just how capable of a supe he was. However, what this episode did was it allowed us to see Homelander revisit his home where he was raised, and we saw just how it impacted him. The main weakness that we often see in Homelander ends up coming out due to him not feeling loved and not feeling needed by those around him. However, the moment he got out of the elevator, the flashback started, and we saw that just like a regular human, the very thing that he went there to kill inside of him, the trauma and what happened to him when he was younger, started entering the forefront of his mind. We heard about him being placed in the oven, the temperature being raised and it actually hurting him. We heard about the nickname that he hated being called, him being locked in the bad room for hours on end and just simply being watched and monitored by those outside, even though he desperately wanted to be out of there. And with that sense of loneliness, neglect, abandonment, and feeling like an outsider started rising to the top, and we ultimately saw exactly why Homelander is the way that he is in the present day. Like a regular human, Homelander was shaped by his environment and all of those experiments which were painful and traumatic, which were designed to test the limits of his capabilities, is what ultimately turned him into the biggest threat that the nation was facing at that moment. I didn't realize how impacted Homelander was by his past, but seeing his flipping of emotions and the revenge that he was looking to carry out, it showed just how hurt he was. A feeling that we don't often see Homelander exhibiting. It was almost like he'd carried that trauma with him for the entirety of his life, and it was like a weight on his shoulders that needed to be lifted off. And when it was, that smile that he had at the end was his way of feeling like his part was done and he was now free. At least he thought he was. So by taking a look into how Homelander felt about the people that raised him, the events that he went through, and the physical space that he was once confined to, we ultimately saw a different side to the character. It added depth, and we actually got a look into the mind of the mighty Homelander, and we saw that there were some chinks in his armor. The way he addressed his trauma. Well, the alternative personality that we see Homelander often have within his mind was actually birthed inside of the bad room as a way for him to be able to get through his experience whilst in there. Basement Level 6 was a place with a real connection in his mind that he needed to cut all ties with and feel as though he was free from. By severing all ties and destroying the very people that raised him, he felt like that was his way of being able to transcend humanity and eradicate this need for love that makes him so dependent on everybody's approval, hence why he ended up returning there. A way that people often move on from their traumatic pasts is by addressing it in a controlled way, which hopefully then allows the person that's looking into their past to be able to move on. Homelander, however, revisited his past and acted on it as a way of getting revenge. He went there to remove this need for love that he had within him. However, nothing that he did will have altered that feeling inside of him. He may not think that he's got any humanity within him, nor does he want any, but that dependency was programmed into him by one of the best psychologists in the country. Hence why he ended up staying in B6 even when he was strong enough to leave. By putting all of the people that put him through the experiments under the same type of tests, that was his way of facing his trauma. It really hit home that Homelander only knew violence, and that despite the fact that these people were awful that did that to him, he only knew violence growing up, so hence why it was a massive part of who he was today. Even though Homelander enacted revenge on the people that shaped him into who he was, he didn't address the core issue of why he went there. He almost just got lost in the revenge. Barbara mentioned how his need for approval is what makes him so human and that it was always going to be present inside of him. And all Homelander had to respond to that was to say that he wasn't human. He's almost in denial and is just pushing the deep-rooted issue further and further down. He hates humans and feels superior to them, but he shares the mind of one due to the way that he was raised, and there's no escaping that. The scene with Barbara in the bad room perfectly encapsulated that, and how Homelander will most likely always feel that within him, no matter how many people he kills or how much better he thinks he'll feel after the revenge that he gets. There was a moment in this episode where, as he put Frank in the oven, Frank said that he was sorry, and Homelander responded by saying, "You're sorry? Now? But why?" That for me really did hit hard, and it showed just how long it had been sitting with Homelander. He'd probably wanted some kind of apology his whole life and always wondered why nobody stepped in and helped him when he was suffering. He knew that every apology that he was getting in that instance was coming from fear, and it wasn't genuine. Almost like how him saying that he forgave them wasn't genuine either. Homelander got the revenge that he wanted, and it made him feel good, but I don't think it's killed the human side that's inside of him, or allowed him to truly move on from the trauma that weighs on his mind. He was almost punishing them for not only putting him through the trauma and pain, but also for giving him that need for dependence and love, his one weakness in the present day. Antony Starr's portrayal. The main thing that I feel really elevated this scene and really allowed the complexity of Homelander's mind to come across was the delivery of the performance by Antony Starr. Showrunner Eric came out a few days before the episode was released and said that it was one of the best performances of Homelander that he's seen in the entirety of the series, and I think it definitely lived up to that. Antony Starr flipped between so many different emotions in the blink of an eye in this episode, and it was so impressive to watch. To being manipulative and luring everybody into a false sense of security, to then laughing hysterically as Marty couldn't do the task that he was forcing him to do, to feeling a sense of tension in the room when Barbara walked in, to then seeing the pain that was hidden under his eyes throughout every scene, and then finally seeing the rage that was just building up inside of him, which meant that his eyes and facial expressions had to do all of the talking. This performance of Homelander was raw, and it was unseen before. Small moments, such as making sure he was correcting people when he was repeatedly being called John, and him looking down a lot of the time because it was triggering for him. Those details didn't go unnoticed, and it just made the performance even more convincing. From the moment that he got out of the elevator, you knew that there was gonna be a bloodbath, but that smile that cut through his face when he was covered in blood was simply the perfect way for Starr's performance to wrap up. Every moment with Homelander in this episode was just simply incredible to watch. You almost didn't know what you were going to get when he appeared on screen after us being in the city with everybody else, and that's what made it even better. We saw a different side to the character, a side which did make him seem more human because he had his own trials and tribulations and issues that he was carrying with him. Considering he went there to remove his humanity, and he did act in a way which was completely inhumane, we actually saw him be the most human that he'd ever been when it came to his emotions and in looking back at his past. Antony Starr as Homelander is just pure perfection, and Homelander's inclusion in this episode was exactly that too. It was a performance that will long live in the memory of the boys. So, there you have it, how Homelander was perfected in The Boys Season 4 Episode 4. If you want to see more videos on The Boys Season 4 or Gen V, then click on the card in the top corner. Both playlists should be up there. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. Is this one of your favourite performances of Homelander? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.